Rossini is going to read next. I first met Frank, he's back on. I first met Frank in the fall of 1976 in the graduate poetry workshop at the U of O. He was teaching in a U of O program for young migrant workers and writing poems about blues musicians and life in New York City. And I was very struck by the deep feeling with which he read his poems about jazz musicians. It was really lovely. His full-length collection, Midnight the Blues, was released by Tsunami Books last October. Please help me welcome Frank Rossini.
I just want to first thank everybody for coming, and thanking Scott and Tsunami Books for hosting this reading. And I also want to thank Roger for helping me publish this. And in 1979, I went and checked it out. Roger had started the Silver Fish Review before that. It was a literary journal. And he and another co-editor, Randy Gorga, decided they would begin to publish chapbooks. And I was honored, and they asked me to publish the first chapbooks. This was 1979. It cost $1. And if you go to Amazon, you can get it for $10. So I'm waiting for the price to go up, and then I'm going to cash them all in. 5 that are left. As Roger said, I grew up in New York City, and I moved here 1972. And I thought, well, I'd better wear this shirt just to prove that I'm a citizen of the Northwest now. This first poem I'm going to read is called Midnight the Blues. It's the title poem for this book. And I wanted to dedicate this to a friend who died about 2 weeks ago, who was a wonderful singer-songwriter and great blues guitarist. And he was in New York in the Greenwich Village music scene for about 30 years. He was probably a supreme Italian-American bluesman. And there's a reference to a long-haired bluesman, and that's him. His name is Frank Christian. And actually at this moment, right now in New York City, they're doing a memorial in the Kettle of Fish Tavern for Frank. So they'll have a bi-coastal thing going on. This is called Midnight the Blues. Midnight the blues in an Irish bar. Songs dark as eyes of 5 Sikhs on the prow of this morning's ferry. Dark arms folded across dark chests, steady their hearts against the sway and yaw of the city. Long-haired bluesman cries, I should have left here long time ago. I throw my hands in the air, dance as the god shakes years off. My bones cast stories with their shadows. I should have left here a long time ago. As the barmaid plunks another pint down, one step, the floor disappears. The grain spirit opens her arms, whispers sweet promises, they flee from me like dreams from the heads of old men who sleep with empty brown bottles. I wake to the ticking of a yellow cab, its glow illumining the cobblestones. Long-haired bluesman moans one more heartache. Before night closes, my skin opens, breathes this all in. This next poem, I just need to tell you about a reference here. Some of you might know this. Did anybody grow up Catholic here? No. Okay. Well, if you grew up Catholic in the 40s, 50s, 60s, you might have heard about the 9 First Fridays. And basically what it was if you went to Mass on the first Friday of 9 consecutive months, then you had made the 9 First Fridays, and you were guaranteed before, when you were dying, that there would be a priest there to hear your last confession and give you the last rites. So, you know, it seemed like a pretty good bargain, you know. These are the kind of things I think Martin Luther, you know, when he hammered his paper on a cathedral wall in Germany, you know, these are the things he was protesting about, but they continued. So anyhow, this is called Solo. Billy was a saxophone, played Bronx tenements, subways, Times Square, Bleecker, the Bowery, a man on the sidewalk, dead, tattooed with words. Billy played Flushing local. His grandfather, asleep beside him, smelled of Old Spice and cigars. In the summer, Billy watched him hoe and water, helped him till it became a job. Billy's father sang Sinatra, Caruso. His mother played piano. Vinnie Kane, a cop who hated the poor for not feeling privileged, sang first tenor. His daughter, beautiful, Billy pursued in the 7th grade. He hadn't read Plato, his perfect idea of love. Billy was a saxophone, played straight pool, bowled the 3rd floor alleys, 70-year-old boys setting pins for pints of wine. Billy played the jukebox in the pizza place, Sunday afternoon dances in the Catholic hospital, the girl from Brooklyn an hour on the Jamaica line for 15 minutes in the cold. Billy's father took him to Calvary. Billy played the names, Giorgio, Achille, Marble Cutter, Vegetable Man. Billy was a saxophone, played his first time. She was kind. Billy took her to White Castle after, put her in a cab. Billy played fire, buildings famous for a moment, then ash and steel bone. Billy played kunga, timbales, record store loudspeakers, rats scuttling through garbage trucks picked up once a week. Billy played children, cold turkey shivering at birth. Billy played women till their lips wore thin. When they left, his heart shrank to a fist. Billy believed Christ was God, the pains of hell, the need for self-sufficiency till it left him alone. Billy was a saxophone, played wind-blown newspapers unfolding from the dead like tattooed skins. At 12, Billy made the 9 First Fridays. On his deathbed, he was guaranteed a priest. This next poem has to do with urban legend. And the legend basically was that people who hadn't been in New York City and would move there or be there for the first time would often encounter, or not often, but sometimes encounter someone who wanted to sell them the Brooklyn Bridge. And so I never bought the Brooklyn Bridge, but I grew up there. I knew all about this. But this one's called Taking the Brooklyn Bridge. Today's a holiday. The pier empty except a young Puerto Rican sowing rock salt on the walkway. He hums to himself. I've come to take your picture, to fix on a pin-prick of light your delicate steel wings, to snap the spot a Mohawk coiffed saxophonist leaned night after night and wove his songs among your spun cables hung like the inner works of some great piano. I've come to take you home, mount you against my ceiling to span the slow currents of my sleep, my holidays of love making. And when I awake, you unfold a blues, aching with light above the sky-scraped water. When I was in the 3rd grade, I was chosen to be a altar boy. And at that time, the Mass was in Latin. So you had to learn all the Latin responses and whatnot. And it was interesting because I had no idea what any of it meant. I mean, I memorized it all, but I had no idea I didn't know what the meaning was. So it just became sort of this sound. And one time, many years later in Eugene, I was talking to a friend, and I was telling him about how jazz had influenced my writing, and he said, yeah, you know, I think jazz and the Latin Mass. And I had to say, yeah, I think so. So, and we now know that Latin is a dead language, and you always wonder, well, how does a language die? Well, this is called How Latin Died. And there's a little, from the beginning of the Mass, the Latin is Introibo ad altare Dei, Deum qui laetificat juventutem meam, which is, I go unto the altar of God, the God who gives joy to my youth. I was taught to fill church with this strange tongue, to reach the boulevard beyond the great iron doors with my voice, to pray like an angel, vowels swaying from my body, each sound sculpted in the church's marble mouth, echoed in my skull, eyes half closed, head bowed, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. My right hand beat my heart as I turned to the priest, my body curled into itself like a stone or an insect hiding from sudden light, head almost touching the immaculate ground. This was God's tongue, and it dwelt in me, till another sound lifted my eyes. In subway stations, on midnight corners, behind bedroom doors, doo-wop. The holy quartet, one sound, 4 voices, first and second tenors, baritone and bass, the sounds of love making, long vowels of release, stuttered consonants, how flesh speaks to flesh. This was the death of Latin. So I was, along the way, I converted to a different religion, and I started going to this church, and so this poem is called Our Lady of the Blue Notes. In the church of Our Lady of the Blue Notes, a Madonna holds a small bird in her prayer-clasped hands. Her mother rests beside her, light with evening's grace. On the wall, icons, African fathers, poets of sky song, earth chant. The A-trains sway and chatter, the watermelon man's green calls. In the church of Our Lady of the Blue Notes, bassman thrums a 4-string cross, drummer crashes metal into fire, saxman conjures breath to flesh, sleeping spirits to holler, to shout. In the church of Our Lady of the Blue Notes, a Madonna opens her prayer-filled hands, a blues flies out. In 1968, I was living in Boston, and it was New Year's Eve, and I was sitting in this apartment I shared with 3 other guys, and we all were going to school there, and we all had gone home, and then we were supposed to come back, and we were going to have a big New Year's celebration, except I was the only one that came back. So I was sitting there by myself, and this friend of mine had given me this album. It was called The Love Supreme by John Coltrane, and I had no idea who John Coltrane was or what the music was. And I wound up having, I think, what I can only say was a truly religious experience listening to this. And this poem came about from that. It's in this first book, and then this is a different version of it. And so it's because of John Coltrane, and it's for the great African-American poet, Amiri Baraka. Jesus, his baby fingers roam the beards of 3 fine-figured saviors, 3 kings, 3 wise men whose wisdom didn't save him. A warning Man may inherit the task of living out life on this round planet alone. Listen. Salvation streams from brass horn clasped between black hands. Back on his heels he shakes, sounds around the heads of priests, junk dealers. Christ passes in a yellow cab, won't stop for him downtown. The drummer plays him home on his own feet. You can imagine quartets and smoke and a player's soul, but until you've played, religion stays with you. Like all things after, again, you're on your own, between spots, unable to go in and listen to what once had to be true. Breath, breathe, listen. He's playing the unfinished business of your heart, breaking in between notes. Coltrane knows about religion, knows its sound. There among the reeds, a prophet talking salvation. There among the reeds, a player of music that takes you deeper into earth, farther into heaven. There among the reeds, a sky train through the void, Shango in the galaxy. Three kings star-struck in the universe, look when they should hear. Saw the star, missed the sound. Saw the man, missed the sound. Now trains uptown blowing a free blue tune. A love supreme leaps from tear into ocean, into life, into no end but rhythm, breaking from a scarred throat. And sort of another poem that deals with another great jazz artist, Miles Davis. And Miles and John Coltrane are John Coltrane played in some of Miles Davis's most well-known quintets. And they kind of represented two facets of African American experience and African American approach to being a musician. John Coltrane, very humble, thoughtful explorer, and Miles Davis, a strong person, a strong man who was, willing to kind of face all the kinds of terrible things that African Americans in America were facing, and also jazz musicians. And so this is a poem from Miles Davis, and it's called Time Jumps, because he liked to do things with time in his music. And at the end of the poem, it kind of goes into a kind of a list of songs by him. It's called Time Jumps from Miles Davis. Time jumps in four directions. To the north, everything is cool and white, a blue sheet of ice groaning like thunder. To the south, skies blaze, a heavenly city torched by ancient blues. To the east, wind rattles her tenement bones. To the west, sun spills red wine into an ocean of beautiful sounds. Miles plays the moment. I don't know what time it is. Miles whispers. A single raven rides the drafts of a desert canyon so quiet you can hear air slip through wings, time sing as it cuts into sandstone cliffs. Miles stands in darkness, his red trumpet spits, time billows from him like silk kimonos splattered with wild roses or bamboo waves shimmering in an earthquake. Miles plays the moment, tempus fugit, yesternow. It's about that time, fat time, big time, time after time. And I don't know, and I don't care what time it is. These next two poems are love poems, and I used to write lyrics with a good friend of mine who was also a singer-songwriter and has also passed away in New York City. And it was always interesting for me to be writing song lyrics and then writing poems, and I approached them in different ways. And so these two poems, as I was writing them, I kind of tried to walk the edge between the two, between the song lyric in the poem. And sometimes people say, well, poems are songs and so forth. But for myself, there was a difference. So this first one's called Sacred Music, and I wrote this for my sisters. I should tell you that my mother and father met. My father lived in New York City, my mother lived in a small town upstate New York. And my father was going to school, and he needed a way to make some money, and he had a friend who said, you know, why don't you learn how to play the saxophone? I have a band, and we'll go play in these hotels up in upstate New York. And my mother worked as a waitress in one of these hotels. So that's how they got together. So it's called Sacred Music. I never heard our father play. They say he swayed our mother with his sax, wrapped her in raccoon, and motored off to New York. Big city boys, small town girl, their world swinging into war. At the end I began wailing fat little baby plaints our mother soothed on the piano, as our father bruised the air with his earnest baritone voice, pop tunes, show tunes, the great American songbook. The last time I heard our father, his voice had turned to a bluesman's rasp. I wet his lips, gave him sips of water. On a cassette by his bed, played Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, its street-wise eloquence smoothed his shadowed face. He was singing, standing at our mother's shoulder, as her fingers danced the keys, both so deep in to the music their song became a kiss, a touch, an act of making love. And the second one is just called The Blues, and it's for a friend of mine who also passed away. So at that age where your friends start passing away, you know? And his name we knew him as Bugs. And you can just sort of imagine this. Actually, I wrote this, we were at a blues festival, and it was the morning after a long night, and people were a few of us were sitting around, all 60-something-year-old men. And this is called The Blues for Bugs. Billy leans in the morning's rising heat. His voice fills with smoke and dried roses. Love, a song, all the blues from the sky, the sea. Love, he says, taught me to believe the joy flesh brings to flesh is a trick. Breath can't braid breath, make a rope to hold me to this spinning planet. And Joe says, but the Lord never gives us more than we can handle. I think even Jesus begged his Father for a break. Love, maybe it teaches us how to play the blues, bend an ear to the heart, hear God crying for one more day of heartache, one more night without sleep. So I'm going to read two more poems. This last one actually both of them. This one, a couple of years ago, being the Luddite that I was, I can't claim that I am anymore. My wife, one of my daughters, gave me an iPod for Christmas, and I thought, what I want an iPod for. But I always liked to walk, and then one day I said, well, I'll just take the iPod with me. And I don't know how many years later now, every time I go walking, I take the iPod with me and I listen to music. And so this poem is called Walking with Monk, referring to Thelonious Monk, an iPod poem. And there's a number of different titles of songs that are kind of woven into this, and if I remember, I'll kind of put a finger up when it's a title. Okay, Walking with Monk. I'm walking with Monk this morning, along the Amazon Creek, still roiling with last week's late fallen snow. Monk's mood in my ear, I stroll past the woman in the blue raincoat, her arms pumping fast as her black rubber boots can go. Past the gnomish drywall guy with his Red Sox cap and stubborn pup by his side. Step amuck by the leaky hydrant, nod to the identical couple with the identical gray-haired dog. Say hi, hi, hi to the trio of women bemoaning the sad fate of a feckless husband. Good morning to the Kenyan runner I read about in yesterday's news. And I smile as Monk and Train wow a wigged out crowd in Carnegie Hall with Nutty, the two hitting all the wrong notes in just the right way. Then Monk goes solo. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. I swerve around a woman waving hands like clouds who stands on one foot as Monk sways one note to another in Mysterioso, till a sax man grabs the lead, blows blue as breeze-blown field of wild camas the crows rise from, black as moonless sky round midnight. Yeah, I'm walking with Monk this morning, past the brilliant corners, down the aisle of the Church of the Rising Sun. I hear him call, "Abide with me," and I respond, "Amen." Hit the crest of one last hill and drink it all in, straight, no chasing. And the last poem I'm going to read sort of echoes Roger's reading. I read a lot of work poems, and this is one from the summer after my 7th grade through the summer after my first year of college. I worked for my uncles, and my uncles had a piano moving company in New York City, which their stepfather had founded in about 1920 with his brother and a horse and a cart. And originally they were a moving business, and then they specialized in moving pianos. And so that was my summer job for a number of years. Moving pianos. I was the kid, the boss's nephew, the boy they sent to the bank with weekly receipts. My pockets bulged with cash, checks, and rolls of coin as I walked the Spanish Harlem streets before they became mean with junk. Past Israel's bodega, Ramos's record store, its tinny speaker wired above the door, blasting the beautiful sounds of Tito Puente, Celia Cruz, the young Willie Colon. Past the corner drugstore where a thin young man daily imagined himself Dracula, covering then uncovering his mouth with a black cape, his eyes revealing nothing. On the way back, I stopped at the hot dog cart and fell in love with the Puerto Rican girls, their eyes black as the beads of my mother's rosary, their tongue sweet as Latin. At 12, I was the office help, adding long columns of numbers in the account books till I became fast as my uncle, calculating the sums in a small place just above my heart. I could feel if I was right. I was the janitor, sweeping the concrete aisles between the pianos I couldn't lift, my arms thin adolescent wires used to hours of basketball, but not to music's weight. In the slow afternoons in the back of the warehouse, I'd try to lift one end of a spinet, imagining myself Murphy, cigarette dangling from a corner of his mouth, laughing at insults tossed between the men, blue outlined women writhing on his forearms as he raised the piano with a slight straightening of his bent knees, then dropped his pants to prove he had eyes tattooed on the cheeks of his ass. The next year, I smoked 3 packs a day and could hold my end of a Wurlitzer. I learned how to Dutch a piano onto the truck's tailgate, throw one end onto a canvas pad, the other into the air, turn and drop it in my partner's hand, slip a wooden roller under its sliding board, crouch at the low end and push. I learned the ties to secure it to the truck, how to pad, where to place the wooden chocks to save the legs, how to take it upstairs, around corners, through doorways made for the thin. I learned how to carry a baby grand, an organ, an 8-foot Steinway concert into houses where Big Henny growled, "The only thing they know how to play is the fucking radio." And I learned about the men. Butch, the shop steward, who did everything by the book and always wore a spotless uniform of heavy cotton shirt and pants and read the racing forms between spots. Preacher, who had a storefront church in Harlem and who would caution me that the men's harsh words about one uncle were nothing, but they were the truth. Russell, whose solemn strength stopped the racist jokes. He was shot resting on a stoop one Friday evening for his weekly pay. Benny, who lived in his unpaid Ford Cadillac and always offered to balance the keyboard when there was an upright to hump 4 stories. Murphy, who lived on the edge, whose back was a tattooed map of Navy ports and his face the path of coming disasters, who sang and played an old upright as it slid from the back of the truck into traffic. And I learned about my uncles, the bosses, Howard, the career military man squeezed out when they decided they wanted the degree to leave the uneducated into slaughter. His motto, there was always work, and if there wasn't, he would make some. Moving stacks of pianos from one side of the warehouse to the other in the heat which covered us like dusty burlap. And George, my uncle of the big heart, the one they'd ask for in advance, a day off, some time to get things straight, who'd buy beers on hot Friday afternoons and send the men home early, whose heart burst from too much smoke and food and sweet times. I learned how the day could break a man with its labor, turn on him like a dog slipping back into wildness, how fragile the back and bone, hand and shoulder, how the strength of the whole can bring down each part. I learned how to be the weight I carried, to move like the masters. I learned the art of work. Thank you.